Okay, we're going to start the last lesson of chapter 8. The good thing is that a lot of the steps are similar to the lessons that we did before. The only difference is that now we're going to be using proportions. So just to remind you, the way you find a proportion, and this will be in your notes, is dividing x by n. X is the number of successes, n is the total number of trials. And then sometimes instead of giving you x and n, you get n and p hat. So if you get n and p hat, you can multiply them to find x. So this is just a review from chapter 7, but we're going to be doing a hypothesis test for the difference between two proportions. Okay, so everything here is in your notes. The first thing that you're going to do is check the conditions. And you are going to see something new that you haven't seen before, and that's p bar and q bar. And I'll go over the formula for that. You had seen p hat, but you had not seen p bar. But once you find p bar, you're going to multiply n1 times p bar and n2 times p bar. And then you'll do n1 times q bar and n2 times q bar, and everything has to be greater than 5. In chapter 7, we were using n times p hat, and that had to be greater than 5. So it's the same idea, but now it's going to be q bar. And then the way that you write the hypotheses depends on the wording. So for example, if the problem says, is there a difference? Has there been a change? You would use this pair of hypotheses. If it says more, increase, higher, then it'll be this one. And if it's the opposite, less, lower, decrease, the alternative is less than. So look for one of these keywords in the problem, and then based on that keyword, you'll decide which pair of hypotheses to use. The formula, so here are the formulas. It's going to look like it's a lot, but I'll try to explain it one at a time. And just look at the example when doing your work. This one's just a review. So p hat is x over n. If they give you p hat and n, then you just multiply to find x. And then the one thing that you learned in chapter 7, but I'll write it here in case you forgot it, is how to find q hat. So the way you find q hat is 1 minus p hat. And that's just a review. Now the new one is p bar. Okay, so p bar, let me show you how it's similar to p hat. Okay, so p hat was x divided by n. But now we have two populations, so we have two p's, two n's, two x's. So p bar is the sum of both x's divided by the sum of both n's. Okay, so again, if we were just looking at p hat, this is what you were seeing before. For p hat, it was x divided by n. So p bar, think of the same thing, x divided by n, but it's the sum of both x's divided by the sum of both n's. So you have two x's and two n's as opposed to one. That's the difference between p hat and p bar. And then just like q hat is 1 minus p hat, it's the same idea. Q bar is 1 minus p bar. So let's say, for example, p bar is 0.25. Q bar would be 1 minus 0.25, and that's 0.75. Let's say p bar is 0.15. Then q bar would be 0.85. So just add these two and then divide. That's the first thing you need to do. Once you have these, then you can use the formula for the problem. The formula for the problem, I know it looks really complicated, but you don't have to memorize it. You'll have it in front of you, and then use Desmos to calculate the value of z. If we were in class, we would do it on the graphing calculator, but unfortunately we're not, so I'll just have you do it on Desmos. Okay, so p hat 1 minus p hat 2. If you look at the formula in your book, it looks a little more complicated. Let me show you. This is the one from the book. Okay, so this always equals 0. That's why I just didn't write it. You can ignore that. So just go ahead and use the formula in your notes. instead of the one in the book. Okay, use this one. I'll send you a copy of the notes. So p hat 1 minus p hat 2, that's how you get p hat. And then in the denominator, that's where you use p bar. So just make sure that everything is under the radical. So it's p bar times q bar, that's how you get it. And then multiplied by 1 divided by n1 plus 1 divided by n2. So all you have to do is just get the values, put them in here, and then just make sure that you put it in decimals. And just a reminder, the way it looks here, it's the same way it's supposed to look on your decimals calculator. So let's do an example. Okay, let's say that we want to know who likes to shop online more, males or females. So they do a survey. Here's the data. They get 200 females and 250 males, and they ask them if they shop online at least once, if they plan to shop online at least once during the next month. So they said 30% of females said yes, and 38% of males said yes. So they don't give us X, they gave us N and P hat. Okay, so if you go to your notes, if you have N and P hat, you multiply them and you get X. Okay, so 200 times 0.3 is 60, and 250 times 0.38 is 95. So your book put N1 times P hat 1. Okay, I'm just gonna write in the book. This is like saying X1. So X1 is 60 and X2 is 95. That just looks less confusing than this. Okay, so once you have everything labeled, okay, that's the first thing you want to do when you do a problem. You want to make sure you label everything. Since we have two, one of them you'll call number 1 and then one number 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say females will be labeled as 1. So n sub 1 is the number of females, p hat 1 is the proportion for females, and x sub 1 is the number of females, and then 2 will be males. So here's everything. Again, we got that from the information that was provided to us in the example. Okay, so step 1 is to check the conditions. And in order to do that, I first have to find p bar. So although it looks like it's complicated, you're just adding and dividing. So it's x sub 1 plus x sub 2. Okay, so go to our data. So that would be 60 plus 95. And then in the bottom, it's n sub 1 plus n sub 2, so 200 plus 250. Again, add, divide, and you get 0.34. That's p bar. And then we need q bar. So remember, q bar would be 1 minus p bar. So 1 minus 0.34, 0.66. So that's how you get those two. Now I can check the conditions. And because we have 2 of everything, it's just longer to check the conditions. Okay, so write them, n sub 1 times p bar, n sub 1 times q bar, etc. These are the conditions. From there, you just substitute the values. So n1 is 200, n2 is 250. So we put both. P bar is 0.34. We put that here. Q bar is 0.66. If you can tell they're greater than 5, you don't even have to write what they equal. You can just check it off. And then all conditions are met, so I'll move on. And I'm gonna write the hypotheses. Okay, so let's look for the keyword in the problem. The question is, at the 10% significance level, test the claim that there is a difference between the proportion of females and males who plan to shop online. Okay, so this would be your keyword, difference. So if I go to my notes, when the keyword is difference or different, it's equals for the null and not equals for the alternative. So that's the one I'm going to use here. So it's going to be p hat 1 equals p hat 2. That means there's no difference. And p1 does not equal p2. So if they're not equal, that means there is a difference. That's your significance level, and then the formulas. Okay, so just do one step at a time so that you don't feel like it's a lot. Okay, so here's the formula, write it down. I suggest that you write down the formula. And then just get the values from your problem. So here at the top, I have everything. So I'm gonna get p hat sub 1, that's 0.3. P hat sub 2 is 0.38. They're right here. And then P bar and Q bar. P bar, Q bar, you substitute them in here. And it's always 1 divided by n sub 1 plus 1 divided by n sub 2. So here are n's, 1 and 2. So 200 and 250. And then this is where you would put this in decimals. And you get negative 1.77. Now for this, you can use either rejection region or p-value, whichever one you want. Because it's z, so it's up to us. So I'm going to use p-value. Okay, so what you do is you're going to look up 1.77 in your z table. So let me go to my z table. I think I have it back here. Sorry, no, where is it? Oh, here it is. Okay, so I go to my z table. And just a reminder, the way you do this is you look up your z value. So negative 1.77. So I go to my z table. I look up negative 1.77. Okay, so here's negative 1.7. And then this one right here. 0.0384. Let me see, negative 1.77. Yeah. So 0.0384 is your p-value. Okay, so you put sorry, let me get it again. 0.0384. So that's my p-value. I compare it to alpha, which the problem said was 0.10, and it's less than. So when the p-value is lower than alpha, you reject the null. So if you reject the idea that there is no difference, we believe that there is a difference. So you say there's enough evidence to reject the null and conclude there is a difference between the proportion of males and females who plan to shop online. So again, it seems like a lot, but just focus on one part at a time. So first, find p hat, and then find p bar. And then after you do that, you'll get q bar and q hat. And then you check the steps, and you go through the formula. So you just use this to guide you. So write all the important information, find p bar and q bar, check the conditions, write your hypotheses, put it in the formula, and then from there will be the same as before.